Rockport, Massachusetts. There he is. He's a plein air and a studio painter, entertaining clients and running classes from his home studio. He works in both oils and watercolor. In the footsteps of the Cape Ann School, he seeks to capture the fleeting light and beauty of the world around us in an impressionistic manner. As well as seascapes, mountain, and village scenes, Mr. Coyne also practices still life and portraiture. This, along with a regular schedule of teaching, both privately and at various established locations, is his method towards a lifetime of personal growth as an artist and an adherence to the art spirit and the lifestyle. So he has outdoor classes. His email is available, and I'm sure you have a few cards.
I do have some cards for anybody.
So if anybody wants to enjoy their day in Rockport and go to one of his classes, take a card. So now I'll let the floor go to Chris Coyne. Thank you.
So there's a million painters out there and a million watercolorists, so sometimes it's a little humbling. And what I like to do is just say, hey, this is what makes me different, and just show you guys some of my tips and techniques and how I go about making a painting. I try to end up with my watercolors being almost as rich as an oil painting, so you might not be able to tell the difference, or you may or may not. I'm going to start with some basics. I use the most expensive paints I can afford at the time, Old Holland or Winsor & Newton or what have you. Try to do almost everything with large round brushes. This one I just use for extra large stuff to get water on there pretty quickly. Pencil and eraser, maybe a jackknife for a couple of tricks in your kit. It's about all I bring with me, indoors or out. I lay out my colors from warm to cool. Some people call it a groupie palette, like the groupie family up in Rockport, using basically 3 yellows, 3 reds, and 3 blues to do everything. I use cadmium yellow, yellow ochre, lemon yellow. For reds, I use alizarin, cadmium red, and cadmium orange. And for blues, I use ultramarine, phthalo blue if I'm trying to mix up a lot of pine trees or something really thick and dense that uses a lot of paint. That's primary blue. And then cobalt blue for a lot of stuff, but more sparing with that at times because it's expensive. So I'm going to start by just getting a whole bunch of water on this page. So it's almost dripping wet. It's pretty warm in here. I think it's going to dry out pretty quick on me. And then I'm going to work from light to dark. I'm going to lay in some of the yellows of the flowers and maybe some of these light purpley colors here and there, and then work back in around them. I'm going to try and stay a little bit away from this bottle, though, because I'm going to do the light colors in the flowers. I'm going to try and get my background to wrap all the way around. It's a big wash to run, but I think I can handle it. We'll see. I like to use the clips instead of tape. You'll see a lot of people tape their watercolors to the board, and you're trapping the water behind it, and it won't dry, and it's harder to gauge the rate of drying when you do that. So long as you clip it, bring it home, put something on it, it'll stay flat. It'll go back to flat again. I sense this one yellow flower. I'm not going to be too much a slave to the exact shape and type of flower or whatever, but I sense this one's a little bit of a softer yellow, so I'm going to use some lemon mixed with my New Gamboge, which is like a cad yellow with a little bit of red in it. And I'm going to go a little bit thicker than I need even for the color, because I know it's going to dry to about 50% of that opacity. Then I'm going to make my yellows be a little bit stronger, a little bit more towards red, maybe even touch my red a little bit and Mix it into that yellow. Start laying in some of these flowers down here. I'll cut around them when I come back with my green and stuff. And I'm just sort of putting the yellow in the area where I see the grouping, where I think it should be. Good quality paper towels help too. The crappy ones, they just get all soaking wet right away. I'm going to try and get like a really light purple, so I'm going to maybe take a little cobalt blue, and a little bit of alizarin, and maybe a little phthalo blue, and get a really light purple, and lay that a few places out here. And also by these flowers up here, maybe. I'll put one more yellow guy up there. I missed too. That'll look good. Go back and just dab a little more color into the centers of some of these. When I started my drawing, too, I just put a mark here and put a mark here to remind myself, just don't let this thing grow over the size of the page. It's so easy to have it just come climbing right off the top there. My water's a little yellow, but I'm going to run it again on there right now. And just try and get this all sopping wet. Because now I'm going to try and make a nice warm gray to just kind of come around this background in general, and then try and afterwards throw some shadow in there for this back shadow. It's just a struggle to keep this stuff wet. It can be done. This is a friend of mine from New York came up and brought me a huge pile of all sorts of different watercolor papers. I think this is Arch's 140-pound from a block. I prefer 140-pound cold press. I just like the way it feels when I work with it. Some people like the heavier hot press. It's okay too, but if I had my druthers, I'd buy the cold press. But any good paper, Fabriano, Jack Richardson, Darches, anything like that should be fine. I'm going to start down here, sort of where that line is. And in a haphazard manner, just start putting in some of this background tone. I don't want it to be too perfect. Right up to the edges of the flowers a little bit. Maybe inside a little there. That's cobalt and cad red mixed together. Just making a warm gray. I'm going to pick up some more paint. And just try and continue this wash, bringing it around. And if it's a little bit blotchy in places, I don't really mind. It'll give it a little bit of interest and not be all flat. And I'm just trying to bring it around and meet my other wash on the other side. And put some more color. Cad red and blue. Cad red and cobalt I use for so many things. I use it as a mixture for white and shadow, for houses, for for skies and a shady, cloudy day. And here, just because I want this sort of haphazard pattern, I'm using a filbert brush instead of the round that I almost use for everything else, pretty much. And that's going to dry even a lot lighter than it looks right now. So I'm going to whip up a substantially darker version of that to be the shadows, just using a lot more of my cobalt blue, my cad red, just working as fast as I possibly can. Bring this like a shadow around here. Shadows are definitely softer as they get further away. Go a little bit more towards blue on the shadow part of it, away from red, and just put some more of these colors in there. I think that's about it for the background for right now. Maybe a little bit more up here, make this a little more interesting coming in. Get that hair out of there when it dries. See if I can go a little darker up here too around the petal. A few spots and just have it stand out. Step back, check my work. No huge disasters. Okay to move on. So I'm basically, like I do with landscape painting, I try to get the whole canvas covered in an initial wash. May not be the perfect value or density, but just to get the whole painting commensurately started, and then I start working it up a little more. I'm looking at this area as a pretty big area to do in a pretty thick blue color. So I'm going to pre-mix my paint before I even wet that area. I'm going to use cobalt and red again, but I'm going to add some more French ultramarine. Maybe a little phthalo blue to get going. More cobalt. That's pretty close there. All right. And why don't we use a clean brush to wet the area for this water, for the blue. Sometimes if the paper is just too thick, too, it just takes forever to get layers to dry and move on to another area. This painting, there's only about 3 different places you can move to. You know, I always say, oh, something's damp. Don't worry, move on and come back and work where you want later. But right now, I want to get this bottle established. So let's see how this does. And you can see there's some highlights. I may not worry too much about them, but I'm going to try and get the different values of you know, above the meniscus it's blue, and it's just a teeny step darker below. So let's get the initial color in there. And I think this blue is going to look nice with that yellow of those flowers. More color. Model it a little bit, try and get it close to the right shape. All right, I'm going to mix up a little more color to lay in there and get that a little bit thicker, because that's going to dry a lot lighter than it is. And even the lightest parts are pretty dark on there. So while it's wet, try and get it on the first shot, if you can, the closest to the right value. That's okay for the initial wash. We'll go back and build that up a bit. We'll go and work on the leaves for a little bit. The greenery is constantly moving around the painting. I might even lay in a little more of that shadow color right now too. I'm going to brush down to a slightly smaller brush now. I might lay in some of these lighter tones of green, and then I'll step my way down towards the darker stuff. So I'm grabbing my new Gamboge yellow and phthalo blue, and I'm going to use some red and orange to modify that and gray it off so it doesn't look like it's out of a can. Maybe this is a chance to use a little more lemon yellow too. Try to keep that on the ground plane in most paintings. can see there's some buds. So use different conventions to make different suggestive marks on your page that help the viewer be able to read what you're trying to say. And that's just personal development over time. Live and learn, make mistakes. Oh, that looks good, that doesn't. I better not do that again. I'll show you a little bit darker here. A lot of red and blue mixed in. Get some of these darker tone greens down here. You know, the camera tends to gray things out and deaden them a little bit, but I'm going to do a little bit of this dark green, but I don't want to get overwhelmed with it. I'm going to brighten things up brighter than they are really, I hope. Before that blue gets too dry there, I think I'm going to go back in now and work on the bottle again for a few minutes. A lot of cobalt, little red. It was just getting too light looking for me. Go back in now and start modeling some more of these flowers. Maybe I can put a little bit more orangey yellow in the center of a couple of them too, because I can see that's already fading out. I'm going to put some nice strokes in there. Yeah, cad red. Yeah. I tend to use my cad orange more as a modifying color than as a color I'm painting with. If I'm looking for an orange color, I'd rather make the orange from yellow and red if I can. Okay. use that orange to modify this and get it real dark. Try to start making some of these look like a little bit more of a petal. I wonder if I can make a little bit thicker purple to dab on for some of those bluey, purpley flowers. I'm going to take a little bit of glycerin and a little bit of cobalt. And almost echo that color. More cobalt, a little more glycerin. And too much technique can just be too much of a good thing, so sometimes you want to stay away from it. I'm going to try and make a thicker version of that red and blue mix for the bottle and see if I can start drawing in now some of the... Let's practice up here on the neck. Yeah. I think it's damp enough, dry enough. Some of the stuff that's like going down inside the neck of the bottle, it's almost opaque. It's still blue. Make the meniscus here. We'll have these guys turn at the meniscus, come down, and disappear on the bottom in dark. Blue, red. The roots or stems or whatnot going down inside there. And back to the foliage a little bit. And then at this point, you can just kind of noodle the painting forever, just looking for the perfect little pieces that make it look real, make it look like a photograph. use this guy down here. I can have some. Maybe we could just get a teeny bit more yellow showing up here. Yellowy green. See if I can't make this guy's petals look a little bit better. There are a couple of little whitey yellow guys sneaking up here too, here and there. A few of them in there. Something over here. Painting's feeling a little lopsided to me right here, so I just want to kind of build up this right side a little bit with some more greens or something to balance it out. It can always be a little more dense in that center in there too. Don't want to overdo it too much. So I might. Important part is the signature. You throw your name in there. Bam. Not so big that it takes over the painting, but not so small that nobody knows who you are. So a buddy of mine recently moved up to Brattleboro. And I suspect, he said this was New Hampshire, so I think it's somewhere, it's southwest New Hampshire. It's a little church and country farm, churchyard scene. So I'll give you a little bit of landscape as well as...
Do you always paint on an easel or do you paint
I almost always paint upright because I want the washes to run down for the most part. I want it to aid in drying. You know, if you're painting flat, stuff's not getting dry usually. It's puddling and taking forever. If you stand it up, it just works better. Just put a little bit of light on the side of the church. It goes back there, too. I think this side of the sky had a little light, too. This building in the background is white. White's the one color that actually takes on a little bit of color as it recedes away from you. Everything else gets grayer and loses its color. White will turn yellow or pink. So I'm just putting just the teeniest little wash of yellow on there. Just to set it back so it doesn't come jumping to the foreground. So we're going to have a kind of a bluebirdy sunny sky. Usually I like to put some yellow in my skies, but not in this situation. It's just too crisp and clear of a day, I'm going to take a teeny bit of my cobalt and red and make this light gray for these clouds. Just put some clouds up there. And the rest I'm going to take some cerulean. For the most part, it's a small piece of paper, so I'm going to just do it with my brush and just paint it right in there. Nice sunny sky. Right up to those clouds. It's more of this cerulean color at the bottom. As the sky gets up towards the top, it takes on a little more cobalt, so I'll just go a little cobalt at the top here. Straight cobalt. Just mix that right in there. And that's going to be my winter sky here, fall sky. Trying to keep my painting as simple as possible, breaking it up into just a few simple shapes, like a children's painting. So I'm going to just put in sort of a tone for that grass. I'm going to take a little lemon yellow, a little yellow ochre, or raw sienna, whatever you have, and just barely touch that cerulean with it. Just get this kind of dry green right up to the stone wall type thing in the front here. A bunch of gravestones on there that I'm probably going to end up leaving out. And use that real light red-blue kind of tone for these stones on the stone wall. And that'll at least be the lighter ones. And I'm just being suggestive and just kind of scumbling it in there. I'm going to take a teeny bit of the pinky mix that's on my blue and red side over here. And I'm going to put some color in for these background trees. Back here a little bit. I might even take my brush and dry it a little. Let's scumble in a little orangey stuff down here at the bottom, below the stone wall. Eventually we can make that be some grasses poking up here and there. Maybe a little yellow ochre with that. Down the bottom here. There's a house, like a rectory house or something, to the left of the church here that's in much darker in color, but it's that same church color, so let's put that in, and then let's put the back of the church in that darker color, under the eave. I'm going to use my cobalt and red again for the shady side of that White House on the right side down there. Maybe for these dark houses back here too, the back sides of them. White House in shade. Sort of a dark tone now for some of these rooftops. Lay them in, working quickly. And steeple. And being bold, you should really leave that to the very end, but that's okay. I'll be bold today. That side of the steeple is going to get shadow treatment. A few more of these blue-gray roofs kicking around. Church roof's got a little bit of a green tint to it. So I just make my gray a little bit on the green side of things. Lay it in. Straighten up that steeple a little bit. Looks like he's got little cornices. Boom, 2, 3. So I got most of the canvas covered here. I'll put a little bit of dark tone over here to remind myself this is going to be in shadow. This is going to be in shadow back here. Just modeling these rocks a little bit down here. Sometimes you just get too much water and it's hard, so you gotta keep fiddling with it until you get the right viscosity on your brush. And I'm gonna put some more of those background trees in a little bit darker this time. Get my brush almost dry. Okay, the dark side of that house there can get it again. Get hit again. I'm going to lay in some of the more delicate trees right now a little bit with that same cobalt and red. I'll just gray off a little. I do want it to be a little bit towards the red side of things. It's not going to be dark enough, I can tell. Picking up some more. And I'm building them from front to back, so I'm going to be putting these trees in, and then I'll superimpose that pine tree over it at the end. And this is just the part where you just have to be patient. Do your lines. Staying within the lines. All right. I'm going to have to lay out some more cobalt I can see. Right. Can almost suggest these distant trees a little bit too. All the way up on the steeple. Slightly bigger brush to do those pine trees. Grab a fresh paper towel. Pine trees can be made a couple different ways. Some people make them going up, and some people make them going down. I don't know if it's, because they're happy or sad or what, but little pine tree colors, phthalo blue, cad red and orange, and then some cad yellow. And first I want to make the trunk a little bit of the tree so I know where I'm going to go with the branching. So this is this big old pine tree on the left over here. And the other guy is this one by the church here. Cedar. Sometimes it's easy for pine trees to get away from you, so that one's getting away from me already, I can see. I'm going to just send it this way a little bit. That's good. And this other one looks more like a white pine over here on the left with the big stuff going up like this on both sides. If you get a little book of trees, you can study the ways, the different shapes of trees, and then when you paint them, people can really read what they are better if they know. They're like, oh, that's definitely a maple, or that's definitely an oak. Just put a little bit of detailing on the church steeple here and there. This pine tree. Boom. I'm going to make sort of a dark grassy green that will be for that shadowy area all over on the left there. All up here. And have that almost go to black on the edge. Never really black, but... And we do have a lot of this. So we can make it more like a stone wall out there instead of gravestones, but we can make a few gravestones too. It is a churchyard. We'll put a few more down here. Have them sort of lead you into the church. And then go and restate the darker values on the stone wall. This grass a little bit darker in here. start making some real thick opaque with, I'm using French ultramarine and my orange and red mix, and I'll lay in some of these other tree branches that are so dark. That's almost looking green now. Let's see. Coming across and close it in. We've got a little pine tree hiding over here too on the side. Maybe I didn't draw it right, but we'll put him in there for good measure. And it's just looking for stuff and painting it in, looking for stuff and painting it in. I'll make this be like a little path leading us up through the yard here. Looks like I was just adding some color here and there too, just to brighten it up. Looks like this is bright orange down here. Like that. Still long, showing that more. A couple little touches to just sort of put some windows in these houses back here, make them look a little more real. This guy's got some windows too. There. Looks like he had a flagpole, but I'm leaving that out. Maybe pick up a little of my blue-gray to make some shadows on the garage back there. A little shadow on the overhang. Maybe variegate the stones a little bit on the church. A little too black, that's not very believable. Put some red back in there. A little dry brush on there to give that kind of wispy leaf look. Maybe a few shadows coming off of some of these little gravestones. Maybe a tree shadow coming down too from this guy. Putting a little bit of cad yellow into this tree just to give it some life on the sunny side. A little bit over there maybe. Same on this one. Which means I can put a little bit of darker on the darker side too. I don't want to overwork it, so I'll make my mark